Hey guys, this is Locke. In this video, I'm going to show you a kind of setup that I use to fight boss fights with Safiyyah. But first, I just wanted to show you an example of one very specific thing you can do with her. And then I'm going to kind of talk about her in general and how to use her in boss fights, because a lot of using her in boss fights actually comes down to team building. But first, I just want to show you this thing very quickly. This is how you can basically avoid taking most of the damage from this boss completely. You can use her summon like this to basically bait that AoE attack. So I'm going to show you. Now what you want to do with this summon is make sure that this summon stands on one of these squares. Now obviously you can't do that here because he can't reach any of the squares that is able to take that damage. But don't forget that he has this skill that allows him to do that. He has quite a huge movement when he uses that skill. So using that skill, I was able to position him to this spot. So now the boss is going to target him with the AoE targeting, which you can see right here. Let me just switch this to fast. There you go. And this thing is going to die before it takes any damage, and you're not going to suffer any consequences. So I just wanted to show you this rotation. So I'll just go through that, and I'm also going to use her dodge skill to show you how she basically avoids both damage. So just a second. So she goes here, she uses her dodge skill, and this thing is just going to expire, and it's a summon, but you're not going to suffer any consequences. If you have Devil Tarot on anyone, that will actually trigger Devil as well. So there you go. So she was basically able to negate kind of both the damage from the boss. Like she was able to negate the AoE damage targeting and then also the single target damage by using her dodge. Now all the other mechanics of this fight still is valid. Like for example, I said almost all damage, not all damage, because once she takes that once she takes that single target damage, she's targeted by this purple thing, right? So now the next time she's not able to do this again. You have to switch her with somebody else. Probably going to use Cocoa to take the damage for her instead. This is only for the level 70 fight, so for anything below that, like the level 65 boss and so on, you can just use her to completely negate any of the targeted damage from the boss, because she can just keep standing there dodging these hits. She can use the summon to take the AoE. So that's one thing I wanted to quickly show you before I jump into talking about her and team building and so on and so on. So let me just get to her for a second and we can go. Most of Safiyyah's damage for the boss fights are actually going to be coming from her trait. Her trait does, at the first star, 16% of the target's HP as damage. Now, since this is a boss, this is going to be reduced by 95%, which comes out to like 0.8% of the boss's HP. However, unlike other HP skills, like for example, this one, or even this one will do 30% of the target's HP as damage. This piercing, it's classified as piercing damage, and you can't increase the damage in any way. You can only decrease it. And when I say decrease it, elite monsters will take 50% less, bosses will take 95% less. Now, her trait, the boss also will take, 95% less, but it is not classified as piercing damage, and so it can actually be increased. How do you increase this damage? You can give her damage buffs. So if you give her a damage 3 buff, so in the previous fight that I just did, the Weaponry Trial 1 boss, the trait did about 2k damage. Now that 2k damage might sound like a little, but it's actually over the course of a fight, it's quite a bit. Whenever she attacks, she does, 2000 extra damage. Whenever the Course of Fortune triggers, she does again an extra 2000 damage because of the trait. Whenever an ally attacks, she will do an assisting attack, and then she will do another trait damage again. So over the course of a fight, I think it's fair to say that she will get at least one attack per round. Of course, she's not going to be able to attack every round, because she might be using other skills that will not trigger an attack. But sometimes she will attack, and sometimes the fortune will attack. So sometimes she'll get, 2 attacks in the round, and sometimes she'll get 0. But I think over the course of the fight, I think it's fair to say that she will probably get at least one attack a round when accounting for the fortune. So one attack per round, and then also another additional attack from an ally attacking as well. An ally attacks, and then, assisting attack triggering that trait again. So I think it's fair to say over the course of the fight, she will average one attack per round and one assisting attack per round. So that's about 28 activations of her trait. So even if you do, say, 2,000 damage, the base damage, 2,000 damage times 28, that's already 56,000 extra damage that she's doing from her trait. That's huge, right? Like the bosses have like 200 and something thousand HP. Like 56,000 is not over the course of the fight. And remember, this is also like she's kind of passively doing it. I'm not even accounting for the initial damage of their skills. I'm not accounting for the initial damage of the assisting attack or any of that. This is just trait damage. She does 56,000, which is pretty huge. And if you give her that damage 3 buff consistently, which I know it's not going to be able to do maybe, well, if you have Edda, you could give it to her consistently. That's going to increase the damage, the initial damage from 2,000 to 2,600. And if you calculate it out, that 56,000 becomes 72,000. So she's doing 72,000 damage from her trait kind of passively, right? If you give her crit rate, the crit damage that everybody automatically gets is 30%. So if she does a crit attack, even with her trait, and her trait can crit, the damage will go up by an additional 30%. So it'll be, if you were trying to math it out, it'll be, say, 2,000 initial damage times 1.3 for the damage 3 buff times an additional 1.3. It's not times 1.6. That's, I mean, I looked at it, that's not what happened. So it'll be another times 1.3, which comes out to 3,380. If you multiply that by the 28 that we looked at before, that's 94,000 damage, almost 100,000 damage, right? And the only thing there is that you have to be able to get her crit damage, sorry, her crit rate up. But if you are able to do that, which, I mean, there are a few ways, which I'll look at in a second. If you are able to do that, she will do 94,000 damage kind of passively, just with her trait, which comes out to a lot of damage, a lot of free damage, right? So I think she is able to, I think she does have a spot on these boss fight teams because her trait does not even count as a range attack, by the way. So in the second weaponry trial, I tested this. Her trait did not count as a range attack. Her assisting attack did, though, so in that fight, unfortunately, you probably have to not bring it. Actually, I didn't actually test if this is a range attack or not, and I can't test it right now because the weaponry trial 2 is not open. But Edda's reaction, her assisting attack does count as a range attack, so I would assume that Safiyyah's assisting attack also counts as a range attack. However, her trait does not. So her trait, you can still trigger it and you won't suffer any drawbacks. It's really interesting that it doesn't count as either a either a range attack or a melee attack. Because in the first weaponry trial, I could use it, no problem. And in the second weaponry trial as well, I could use it, no problem. So it's really interesting. But anyway, so I forgot my point. So yeah, so I mean, so she does about 100,000 damage for free with what I just mentioned. Now in the second weaponry trial, because I am removing the reaction, she will do half of that. So that's like about 50,000 damage. Okay, 50,000 still isn't bad, And I would probably, she can do a bunch of other things as well. This is just the trait that I'm focusing on. So I'm going to touch into her other skills and how I would set her up in a second. But I think the trait is the biggest thing about her and how you can get a lot of damage out of her. So that's what I would, that's what I'm spending some time on. How do you increase her crit rate? I mean, the obvious choice is Cocoa, because Cocoa can give a 30% crit rate buff. She will also give a 15% crit damage buff, so that 30% will go up to 45% crit damage, so it'll increase her damage even more. She does about, in the previous fight in the weaponry trial 1, with this buff, when she crits, she did about 3.8k damage instead of 2k, so that's quite a significant bump, right? You can also use lightning to give the crit aura, so that's 20% extra crit damage, 20% extra crit rate. You can also use this weapon, which would give her, the 5th star, 15% extra crit. I would not recommend using the Justice Tarot. I think the Fortune Tarot is what you should be using on her because you want to get that trait activation as often as possible. So I would not recommend using this one for an extra 15%. I would rather just go with the Fortune. I think it's more consistent, and I think it's a lot more powerful on her. Um, yeah, so I mean, there isn't too many sources of crit rate, but if you have Cocoa, I'm sure you're going to be bringing Cocoa to like everything, and that's already a 30% crit rate boost. Um, and with this, that becomes 45%. You may or may not bring lightning. I mean, most people probably may not be bringing lightning because a lot of people have more legendaries now. So 45% crit rate is, I would, I would say most people can achieve that if you have Cocoa. So that's not bad. 45% crit rate. You crit once every other turn, so you do an extra 45% of damage with the crit. Otherwise, you don't, which I think is fair. I think that'll still add up to quite a bit of damage. Maybe like 70 to 80k damage with her trait when critting half the time. I think that's a fair assessment. So already you're doing just a lot of damage just with her trait, and we haven't even touched on other skills. Uh, so this skill is good for all three weaponry trials. You just saw how I was able to what is it called, to target that AoE skill with their summon and then not suffer any drawbacks. You can kind of do the similar thing with the second weaponry trial boss as well. I've done that with my Akambe video, so if you're interested, you can look at that. It's the exact same thing. But you might not even want to do that. You might, there are other skills that she brings to that boss, so maybe you don't even want to do that. But for the third weaponry trial, again, this is a very good skill to bring because the third weaponry trial spawns all these minions all over the place. So having a minion of your own to attack those guys is going to save you a lot of time, and it's going to help you to deal with that boss. So this skill is potentially very good in two weaponry trials and sort of good in the second one. The dodge skill is great in the first weaponry trial. In the third weaponry trial, you have to be able to get her magic defense up a lot, which might be hard to do. Like you might have to give her very specific equipment, and also have only her stand in like a magic defense aura. Like for example, Angel has this aura. Where is she? Um, there she is. She has this aura where she increases the magic defense of all the other allies within 2 tiles around the character. You might only need to have her in that spot and have nobody else so that it'll be targeting her. But usually in the third weaponry trial, everyone is running Devil Tarot, and then you're gonna have her running the Course of Fortune. So everyone else's magic defense might be up. So I think it's really hard for the boss to target her. So you probably wouldn't want to bring this unless you can guarantee that her magic defense is going to be very high so that she can dodge the boss's single target attacks. In the second weaponry trial, it's not useful to bring at all because the boss does not do any single target damage. In the first weaponry trial, this is a very good skill to bring because it's her only range skill, and you want to have some kind of attack to trigger her trait. In the first weaponry trial, you will be using all three of these skills. So although it has a cooldown of 3, it really matches perfectly with the boss's attack schedule because one turn you'll be using this to bait that AoE attack. The next turn you'll be using this to dodge the boss's skill. The next turn you'll be using this one. So once every 3 turns fits perfectly with the boss's rotation as well. For the second weaponry trial, if you're not bringing this one, I would actually suggest bringing maybe this one. In the second weaponry trial, you'll be using a lot of the flag. You'll be using a lot of buffs, and people use the Flag of Convaleria talent to give everybody extra buffs. So with that flag, you also restore a lot of extra energy as well. So if you're not using this guy, if you're not using the summon, which the summon I think is beneficial, but sometimes you're giving up, sometimes your characters are just strong enough that you can take both of those cross attacks anyway. So maybe it's not that useful. So that's why I said like it's really good in 1 and 3, but maybe somewhat useful in number 2. So if you're not bringing this one, I would suggest bringing this skill because it does 170% of damage, right? Uh, if you don't want to spend the Castelia to do that, I would also recommend bringing this skill, because this has 130% of damage instead of 170, but it increases the crit rate by 15%. So it would still, and supposing you have that extra 15% crit damage modifier, that's going to, increase her damage a lot. So that 130% will probably be closer to 170. So if you don't want to spend the extra Castelia, this might be, you can just bring this instead. You're not going to kill the target, so you're still going to be using 3 energy, but you're going to get a lot of energy from the flag to back that up. So what else should you bring? I would suggest bringing this HM Commander instead of this one for the other weaponry trial. So number 2 and 3. This will make all your allies do extra attack to this boss, right? So the boss is going to take 15% extra damage from everybody around her. So she does a lot of stuff passively. Like I said, she does a lot of damage with her trait, kind of passively. And then she's also going to make all your allies do so much more damage as well. I don't recommend bringing the Settlement of the Hanged Man because it only triggers, less than 30% of the boss's HP. So for 70% of the fight, it's not going to do anything. And then when it finally does, it'll do about 2k damage per hit, and you can't increase it because this is a piercing damage. So it will not benefit from the damage 3 buffs. It will not benefit from the crit damage buffs. It's just, say, 2k damage, and that's it. So I would not recommend that. I would recommend, as I said, something like this. Sorry, so what do I do here? Yeah, for this skill, I don't know. I mean, there isn't really, so for the second weaponry trial, maybe this is the best way you can, oh, sorry, you have to remove that. Maybe this is the best way you can set her up for the second weaponry trial, because there isn't really anything else I would rather bring if I'm not bringing this one. So if I'm not bringing anything, I might as well bring the Settlement of the Hangman to get that extra boost at the end. For the third weaponry trial, I would do, yeah, I would do this if I can't target the boss. If I could target the boss, I'd probably do this. When I say target the boss, if I can get the boss to target her, I'd probably do this. If I cannot get the boss to target her, then I would probably do that. Okay? But Safiyyah is also about team building. You really need to bring that damage 3 person with her to get the most out of her. So you really want to be bringing either Edda or Cocoa. Cocoa can apply both the damage 3 buff and the crit damage buff and crit rate. So Cocoa is like her best friend, really, when it comes to these boss fights, because she can give her all the buffs that she needs to function really well. But I also want to highlight Candlelight, because Candlelight has a trait where if somebody has the Hangsman's mark on them, allies within 5 tiles around her is going to take 20% less damage. So just having her on the field, and obviously the boss is always going to be having the Hangman's buff, debuff now, thanks to Safiyyah, so your whole team is basically going to be taking 20% less damage. This is going to help you survive these encounters, and actually might make her a viable healer to bring, because she does have the, single target heal skill. She also has this skill, which will heal, and it's an AoE heal for 65% of her M attack. And she can also do energy restore. So she can give 1 energy to all allies, or she can do 4 energy to 1 ally. You probably, if you are doing this, you might want to bring something like this, which can additionally dispel 1 debuff on an ally, because sometimes these bosses cast these debuffs that you want to get rid of. She doesn't have any debuff removal, but if you bring this, she can at least remove 1 debuff a turn, so it might be helpful. If you're bringing her and Cocoa, I think that probably would suffice for all your healing needs. Remember, everyone also takes 20% less damage as well, so that's also kind of like passively increasing the survival of your team just from her trait. Like, you're not doing anything, you're just passively increasing the sturdiness of your team. So I wanted to highlight her as well, because I think having her and Safiyyah on a team for a boss fight alongside Cocoa, the 3 of them, I think can do a lot. And most of it is also done passively. Only Cocoa has to actively give everybody the buffs they need. But other than that, like, it's working kind of passively. And once Cocoa gets to 5-star, once Safiyyah gets to 5-star, these two are going to do massive like amounts of everything, because Cocoa can give her happiness buff at 100% chance when it's at 5th star, and that means she will also be able to give it to herself, right? So the cooldown of this thing goes from 3 to 2, and it only needs 2 energy. So you can give everybody this crit damage, crit rate buff every other turn, and it lasts for 2 turns. So they will always have it active like all the time. And so Safiyyah's skills also will have reduced cooldown, reduced energy, and she'll be critting more often, doing extra crit damage. So yeah, once I get to 5-star, like I think the game will become like easy mode. Of course, you will have harder content then, but these two characters at their 5th star will do a lot. And remember, the trait damage will also double, right? It goes from 16% up to 32%. So that will damage the amount. So if she did, like, say, our calculation showed that she does, say, around like 80,000 damage to the boss, maybe that'll go up to 160,000 damage over 14 turns, right? And this is again passively. And I didn't even account for the extra 50% crit damage that you get from Cocoa. So it could be even more than that. But anyway, I think I've talked a lot. Like, I think I've given you guys some ideas and ways to build her for these boss trials. I wanted to show you some stuff yesterday when all 3 of them bosses were active, but I just didn't have time to record, and I don't want to wait until the next week. So I just thought I would make this video and kind of just show you how to do it without giving examples, like, without actually showing you in the game, but kind of talking about it. I hope this makes sense. If you guys have other suggestions, let me know. But yeah, that's it. I think that's all I have to say on this. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Yeah, I will see you guys next time. Take care now.